I'm Maya Rodriguez, 28, and I've lived with type 1 diabetes since I was 12. That day, at my father's 70th birthday celebration in our family's Denver home, my carefully managed world came crashing down. My sister Jessica lunged for my purse mid-conversation, her voice cutting through the party chatter like a blade. "Cut it out. Everyone knows you're just acting," she screamed, yanking my bag away as I reached for my glucose monitor. I stumbled backward, my blood sugar already dropping, panic flooding my chest as relatives turned to stare. The room fell silent except for Uncle Roberto's uncomfortable cough and Aunt Carmen's sharp intake of breath. My cousin Elena whipped out her phone, recording my desperate attempt to get my purse back like it was some kind of entertainment. Their judgmental eyes burned worse than the hypoglycemic tremors starting in my hands. I caught Jessica's glare. That same suspicious look I'd endured for years, the one that said she thought I was milking my condition for attention. My best friend Sophia, who'd been by my side through countless emergency room visits, stood frozen beside the punch bowl, her face pale with shock. I wanted to explain why I needed my purse so desperately, but the room's hostile energy drowned out my thoughts. The betrayal cut deep, not just from Jessica, but from everyone who seemed to think this was justified. I'd faced skepticism before, but never like this. Not at family gatherings, not so publicly, not when my health was literally on the line. What hurt most was knowing someone was watching, someone who knew the truth about my condition. And soon, 7 words would flip this nightmare on its head, leaving everyone speechless. Have you ever been betrayed by family who didn't understand your invisible illness? Felt their judgment cut deeper than any physical pain? Drop a comment and share your story. I'd love to hear how you faced those moments when people closest to you doubted your truth. Stick around because what happened next changed everything. The living room buzzed with celebration and the warm scent of my grandmother's tamales. Kids darted between folding tables laden with tres leches cake and agua fresca, their laughter mixing with mariachi music streaming from Dad's old stereo. Jessica stood in the center of the hardwood floor, my purse clutched in her manicured hands, her voice slicing through the festivities like a machete. "Maya's been faking this diabetes thing to get out of family responsibilities," she declared, shaking my bag for emphasis. "I'm the one stuck helping Mom and Dad while she plays the victim with her blood sugar emergencies." Her words hit like a physical blow, and heads turned, relatives murmuring in Spanish and English. My cousin Elena's phone stayed trained on me, her smirk barely hidden behind the camera. My cousin Diego, always quick to follow Jessica's lead, let out a harsh laugh, egging her on. Another cousin, Alejandro, chimed in from near the kitchen doorway. "I saw her eating candy at the mall last week. No insulin shot or anything." My stomach twisted into knots. Alejandro had glimpsed me during a rare good blood sugar day when I could manage a small treat, not understanding the careful calculations involved. I opened my mouth to explain, my voice already shaky from dropping glucose levels. "That was after I'd carefully calculated my insulin dose," I said. "I can't live my life without proper monitoring." "Oh," but Aunt Carmen cut me off, her tone dripping with familiar skepticism. "Don't lie to us, Maya. We've all seen you conveniently get sick when there's work to be done." The crowd's eyes bored into me, some nodding knowingly, others whispering behind cupped hands. I felt like a specimen under a microscope, every move scrutinized and judged. Mom stood by the gift table, her gaze fixed on the floor tiles, as if avoiding eye contact would somehow preserve the family's harmony. Dad, adjusting party decorations near the mantel, didn't even glance over, too busy entertaining his old work buddies with stories about his retirement. Their silence stung more than any accusation. Sophia moved closer to me, her hand finding mine, her phone subtly angled to capture what was unfolding. I tried to steady my breathing, but the familiar fog of hypoglycemia was creeping in, making it harder to think clearly. My sister paced in front of the couch, her voice growing louder as she recounted how my medical expenses had strained our parents' budget over the years. "She's been manipulating this family since high school," she spat, gesturing wildly with my purse still in her grip. Those expensive insulin pens, the continuous glucose monitor, all those doctor visits. It's draining Mom and Dad dry. Elena clapped from behind her phone as if this were a performance, while Aunt Carmen's recording captured every moment of my humiliation. I wanted to scream, to make them understand that diabetes wasn't a choice, that every day was a careful balance between life and death. But my words felt trapped behind the growing panic of falling blood sugar. Alejandro doubled down, his voice carrying across the room. She looked completely normal at the mall, I swear. No medical equipment, nothing. His certainty fueled the crowd's murmurs, and I caught several relatives shaking their heads, their skepticism growing like a wildfire. I reached toward Jessica, my hand trembling noticeably now. "Please, I need my glucose tablets," I said, my voice louder this time. "My blood sugar's dropping." But my plea fell on deaf ears, drowned out by Elena's snickered comment, and Aunt Carmen's muttered, "Sure, that's convenient timing." Mom's shoulders slumped further against the gift table, her silence building a wall between us. Dad laughed at something his friend said from across the room, completely oblivious to the storm destroying his daughter's dignity. Sophia's grip on my hand tightened, her quiet strength the only anchor keeping me from complete panic. The accusations kept coming, each one more vicious than the last. Jessica claimed I'd been scheming since my diagnosis, that I'd learned to fake symptoms to manipulate situations in my favor. Her words painted me as a master manipulator, rather than someone fighting a lifelong chronic condition. Elena's laughter rang out again as she zoomed in on my trembling hands, and Alejandro nodded emphatically, repeating his mall story like gospel truth. Carmen's phone never wavered, capturing my every flinch and stumble as hypoglycemia began affecting my coordination. I felt the crowd closing in, their judgment suffocating me like smoke. I scanned the faces around me, desperately searching for one ally, one person who might believe me. Mom continued avoiding my gaze, her need to keep peace apparently more important than protecting her daughter. Dad tossed his head back in laughter at another retirement joke, his back to the destruction happening in his own living room. Sophia whispered, "I've got this on video," her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around us. I clung to her words, but the isolation felt overwhelming, like drowning in a room full of people who shared my blood, but not my truth. Jessica's voice rose to a crescendo as she held my purse high above her head like a trophy. "Admit it," she demanded. "Admit you're faking this whole diabetes thing for attention." Her accusations echoed off the living room walls, drawing even more eyes from the kitchen and hallway. I opened my mouth, ready to fight back with what little energy my dropping blood sugar left me, when a movement at the edge of the crowd caught my attention. Someone had been listening from the doorway. Someone who knew the medical truth. A calm presence stepped forward, ready to change everything. A voice cut through the chaos, calm but authoritative. "She's not faking. I can prove it." Dr. Maria Gonzalez, my father's longtime friend and my endocrinologist for the past 5 years, stepped into the living room, her presence immediately commanding silence. She placed a firm hand on Jessica's wrist, her eyes steady and professional. "Put down that purse immediately." The 7 words sliced through the tension like a surgical blade. The living room, moments ago filled with accusations and cruel laughter, fell eerily quiet. Relatives froze mid-whisper, their faces shifting from skepticism to uncertainty. Elena lowered her phone, her earlier smirk evaporating. Alejandro pressed back against the kitchen doorway, his confident accusation suddenly seeming less certain. Dr. Gonzalez carefully took my purse from Jessica's loosened grip and handed it to me. I immediately fumbled for my glucose meter, my hand still shaking as I pricked my finger. The device beeped. 52 Neoimer DL. Dangerously low. I quickly chewed 3 glucose tablets while Dr. Gonzalez addressed the stunned crowd. "Maya's blood sugar is currently at 52, she announced, her voice carrying the weight of medical authority. "Normal range is between 70 and 140. She could have gone into diabetic coma if this had continued." The silence deepened as relatives processed this information. My aunt's phone slowly lowered as the gravity of the situation became clear. Dr. Gonzalez pulled out her own phone, her movements deliberate and professional. "I monitor Maya's continuous glucose data through a medical app," she explained, showing the screen to the nearest relatives. "This shows her blood sugar dropping steadily for the past 20 minutes. She turned the phone so others could see the alarming downward trend on the graph. If anyone doubts this, I have 16 years of medical records documenting her type 1 diabetes. The crowd leaned in, studying the undeniable medical evidence. Jessica's face drained of color as the reality of what she'd done began to sink in. I was just trying to protect our family from being taken advantage of, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Her excuse rang hollow in the medical evidence-heavy air. Aunt Carmen shifted uncomfortably, slowly tucking her phone into her pocket. Elena's eyes darted to the floor, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Alejandro, who'd sworn he saw me eating normally, stood rigid against the doorway, his certainty crumbling under professional medical testimony. The crowd's shock was palpable, their earlier judgment replaced by heavy, uncomfortable guilt. I continued chewing glucose tablets, feeling my blood sugar slowly climbing back toward safety. For years, I'd fought to prove my condition was real, and now the truth was laid bare by someone with actual medical credentials. But relief mixed with anger. Anger at Jessica for her public attack, at my family for believing her so easily, at the years of subtle doubt I'd endured. Why had it taken a doctor's intervention to make them see what I'd been telling them all along? Sophia squeezed my shoulder, her grip fierce with protective loyalty. "They'll pay for this," she whispered, her voice low but resolute. I nodded, my jaw tightening as determination replaced the fear. Dr. Gonzalez paused her explanation, her gaze sweeping across the ashamed faces. "Maya's diabetes is severe and requires constant management," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "She's one of the most compliant patients I've ever treated. She's fought harder than any of you realize." Her words landed like a medical verdict, and the silence grew even heavier. Carmen avoided my eyes, her earlier scorn replaced by visible unease. Elena's hand dropped from where it had been covering her mouth, her expression unreadable. Jessica tried to speak again, her words stumbling over themselves. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she said, but conviction was nowhere to be found in her voice. I looked toward Mom, hoping for some sign of maternal support, but she remained frozen by the gift table, her face a mask of embarrassment. She'd stayed silent to preserve party harmony, and now that silence felt like the deepest betrayal of all. Dad finally glanced over from his conversation, his brow furrowed in confusion, but he said nothing meaningful. Their inaction burned like acid, a reminder that I'd been fighting this battle alone. Sophia's whispered promise echoed in my mind, fueling my growing resolve. This wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. It was about justice, about holding people accountable for their cruelty. Dr. Gonzalez turned to me, her eyes kind but professional. "You don't have to stay here," she said softly, checking my glucose meter reading again. I nodded, gripping my purse tightly, the weight of this moment settling deep in my bones. The crowd parted slightly as I stood, their faces a blur of regret and discomfort. Jessica reached out with a trembling hand. "Maya, please," she started, but I shook my head firmly. "You've said enough." Her hand fell to her side, and she stepped back, tears forming in her eyes. The medical evidence had changed everything, exposing not just Jessica's cruelty, but the family's willingness to doubt my chronic illness. I felt simultaneously lighter and more determined. The anger remained, sharp and uncompromising. Sophia stayed close, her presence a quiet source of strength. I knew she'd captured every moment on her phone, evidence we'd need later. The crowd's silence followed us toward the front door, their shock a stark contrast to their earlier cruel entertainment. "Doctor." Gonzalez gestured toward the entryway, her voice gentle. "Let's get you somewhere quiet where we can monitor your recovery." I took a step, my blood sugar slowly returning to safer levels, my resolve stronger than ever despite the uneven emotional ground. Dr. Gonzalez guided me toward her car while Sophia walked protectively beside me. The evening air felt cool against my flushed skin as we left the party chaos behind. "You don't need them," Sophia said, her voice soft but unwavering. The words anchored me, cutting through the emotional hurricane I was weathering. Behind us, Jessica's footsteps hurried across the front porch. "Maya, wait," she called, her tone desperate. I paused, still gripping my purse, and turned to face my sister one final time. Her face was streaked with tears, her earlier confidence completely shattered. "I was only trying to help Mom and Dad financially," she said, words rushing together. "You know how much your medical bills cost them." Her excuse felt like a flimsy shield for the cruelty she'd displayed. I shook my head, my voice steady despite the emotional storm raging inside. "You almost killed me, Jessica. This isn't about money." Her mouth opened and closed without sound, her hands falling limp at her sides. I turned away, the weight of her words fading as I moved toward Dr. Gonzalez's car. The crowd of relatives remained clustered on the porch and in the doorway, their earlier confidence replaced by uncomfortable shame. Carmen clutched her phone, the video she'd recorded now feeling like evidence of her own cruelty. Several cousins averted their eyes, their faces tight with unease. Elena and Alejandro stood silently among them, their accusations now echoing in the distance like bad dreams. Dr. Gonzalez opened the passenger door, her expression calm but resolute. "We'll go to my clinic for a proper blood sugar check," she said, her voice offering quiet reassurance. I slid into the passenger seat while Sophia settled in the back, her phone still in her hand. As the car pulled away from the house, I glanced back at the party. Mom stood on the front steps, her head bowed, more concerned with avoiding family scandal than defending her daughter's life. Dad remained inside, his laughter drifting through the open door as he continued entertaining guests, apparently unaware that his daughter had nearly suffered a medical emergency. Their silence wasn't just neglect. It was a choice that cut deeper than Jessica's accusations. The drive to Dr. Gonzalez's clinic was brief, Denver's city lights creating a blur outside the windows. Sophia leaned forward, her voice determined. "Carmen didn't delete her video, but I've got my own," she said, patting her phone. "Every second of it." Her words sparked something new in me, a resolve I'd never felt before. My family had ignored my medical reality for too long, dismissing my struggles as attention-seeking behavior. I couldn't let this pattern continue, not when my life was literally at stake. At the clinic, Dr. Gonzalez ran comprehensive blood work, confirming my glucose levels were stabilizing after the emergency. Her kindness stood in sharp contrast to my family's indifference, and it strengthened my resolve. Sitting in the examination room, I pulled out my phone and searched for a lawyer specializing in disability rights and medical discrimination. Sophia scrolled through her contacts, her expression focused. "I know someone," she said, tapping a name. "Rachel Martinez. She's fierce and specializes in cases exactly like this." I dialed the number, my hand steady despite everything that had happened. When Rachel answered, her voice was sharp and professional. I explained the situation. My sister's public attack, the family's complicity, and the video Sophia had captured. Rachel listened intently, her questions precise and legally focused. "This is a clear case of disability harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress," she said. "We can file both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit for damages." I hung up with my decision crystallized. "I'm doing this," I told Sophia, my voice firm with determination. "I'm pressing charges against Jessica." She nodded, her eyes gleaming with fierce approval. "I'll be your witness," she said, her hand resting supportively on mine. The choice felt absolutely right, a crucial step toward reclaiming my dignity and protecting my health. Jessica's actions weren't just a moment of sibling rivalry. They were a dangerous attack on someone with a serious medical condition, enabled by years of family denial and skepticism. Mom's need to keep peace had allowed doubt to fester, her silence serving as tacit agreement with Jessica's suspicions. Dad's oblivious attitude, his focus on party guests over his daughter's welfare, was its own form of abandonment. I thought back to the party, to the faces of my relatives and their eagerness to judge. Carmen's video, still undeleted, was evidence of their complicity. Elena's laughter, Alejandro's false testimony. They'd all participated in what could have been a life-threatening situation. But Sophia's video was my weapon, a record of truth they'd tried to bury with their skepticism. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. This was about every diabetic who'd been accused of faking, every person with invisible illness who'd been dismissed. Dr. Gonzalez returned with my test results, clipboard in hand. "Your levels are returning to normal," she said, her eyes kind but serious. but take it easy for the rest of the evening." I thanked her, my resolve only growing stronger. Sophia helped me to the car, her presence a constant reminder that I wasn't fighting alone. As we drove back into the Denver night, I felt a fundamental shift inside me. The party had exposed my family's worst instincts, but it had also ignited something powerful, a determination to hold them accountable for their dangerous ignorance. Rachel's words echoed in my mind: harassment, discrimination, damages. They weren't just legal terms, they were a pathway to justice. Jessica had crossed a line that could have killed me, and my parents had enabled her through years of willful ignorance. I wasn't seeking revenge, but I needed them to understand the life-threatening consequences of their actions. Sophia glanced at me as we drove, her expression fierce with loyalty. "We've got this," she said, her voice a promise I believed completely. I nodded, my heart steady and determined. The real fight was just beginning. A few days later, police officers knocked on Jessica's door. Detective Sarah Thompson stood on the front porch of my sister's apartment, her badge catching the Denver morning sunlight. She questioned Jessica about the incident at the party, citing potential charges of endangering someone with a medical disability and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The video Sophia had recorded, now in police custody, showed every detail. The purse grabbing, my desperate pleas, the family's cruel laughter, and my dangerously low blood sugar reading. Detective Thompson's voice was professional as she explained the seriousness of the allegations, her notebook filling with statements from witnesses and medical professionals. Jessica's face, Sophia later told me, was a mask of disbelief, her usual confidence replaced by trembling uncertainty. Back at my apartment, I met extensively with Rachel Martinez, my attorney. She'd filed both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit against Jessica, seeking compensation for medical expenses, emotional distress, and the endangerment of my health. "The video evidence is ironclad," Rachel said, her eyes sharp behind her designer glasses. "It proves both intent and reckless disregard for your medical condition." I nodded, the weight of her professional confidence settling around me like armor. This wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about establishing consequences for those who endangered people with disabilities. Rachel outlined our legal strategy: criminal charges for endangerment, civil suits for damages, and possible restraining orders for future protection. The process felt daunting but necessary, each step a movement toward justice. That evening, my phone buzzed with a call from Mom. Her voice was strained, almost pleading. "Please don't press charges against Jessica," she begged. "I'm terrified this will destroy our family completely." Her words stung like acid, a reminder of all the times she'd prioritized family harmony over my medical needs and safety. I took a deep breath, my voice steady and clear. "Mom, you chose Jessica's feelings over my life for years. I can't keep pretending that's acceptable." She went silent for a long moment, then hung up abruptly, her absence somehow louder than any argument could have been. Sophia came over later that evening, bringing coffee and her unshakable support. Over steaming mugs, she shared her own story of family betrayal, a time when her relatives had dismissed her anxiety disorder as weakness, calling her dramatic instead of offering help. "It hurts, but you learn to stand tall," she said, her eyes steady with hard-won wisdom. "You're doing that now, and it's brave as hell." Her words strengthened my resolve, reminding me that courage wasn't about ignoring pain, but facing it head-on with determination. I thanked her, feeling my commitment grow stronger. She'd already agreed to testify at any hearings, her video serving as the cornerstone of our case. My phone pinged constantly with messages from various relatives, Carmen, Elena, and Alejandro, all asking how I was doing. Their texts were polite and cautious, but completely lacking any real accountability for their actions at the party. I left most of them unread, unwilling to engage with half-hearted gestures that avoided addressing their cruelty. Instead, I threw myself into diabetes management with renewed focus, tracking my blood sugar religiously and pushing through challenging days with determination I'd never felt before. Each successful day of management felt like defiance against those who doubted me. Dr. Gonzalez noticed the change during my appointments, her quiet nods acknowledging my improved control. In the quiet evening hours at my apartment, I started a blog called Invisible Battles. At first, it was simply a way to process the party incident, to put words to the pain of being medically gaslit by my own family. I wrote about the moment Jessica grabbed my purse, not with shame, but with clarity, describing how it exposed the dangerous ignorance surrounding invisible disabilities. I described the weight of Mom's silence, Dad's indifference, and the crowd's eagerness to judge what they couldn't understand. The words poured out, raw and unfiltered, each post feeling like lifting a burden I'd carried for too long. I didn't expect readers initially, but writing felt like reclaiming my voice after years of defensive explanations. The blog became my sanctuary, a space where I could be honest without fear of family judgment or medical skepticism. I wrote about the lawsuit, not in specific detail, but as a choice to stand up for disability rights. I shared the exhaustion of constant blood sugar monitoring, the small victories of good diabetes days, and the ache of family relationships dissolving under the weight of ignorance. Each entry felt like stitching together the parts of myself that had been torn apart. Sophia read my posts religiously, her comments full of encouragement and fierce support. "You're turning pain into power," she wrote under one entry, and I held on to that phrase like a lifeline. Jessica's legal troubles continued to escalate. Detective Thompson called with regular updates, informing me that witness interviews from the party supported our case. Rachel prepared extensive documentation, her confidence serving as a steady anchor in the legal storm. I maintained my focus on diabetes management and blog writing, the combination becoming a ritual of healing and empowerment. My family's messages, Carmen's awkward apologies, Elena's tentative questions, even Mom's guilt-ridden voicemails, faded into background noise. Their words felt too little, too late. I wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the consuming way I'd felt immediately after the party. Instead, I felt a quiet strength, a certainty that I was on the right path toward justice and healing. The lawsuit wasn't just about Jessica anymore. It represented every time I'd been dismissed, every doubt I'd had to disprove, every medical emergency that had been minimized by family skepticism. Through writing, I began to see my story as something larger than personal pain, something that could help others facing similar struggles. I started receiving emails from readers, people with diabetes, chronic illnesses, invisible disabilities who found strength in my words. Their stories wove into mine, creating a tapestry of shared struggle and resilience. I wasn't alone anymore, not in the isolating way I'd felt surrounded by family yet completely unseen. Naomi's unwavering support reminded me that chosen family could be stronger than blood relatives who refused to understand. The legal proceedings moved forward steadily. Rachel sent crisp updates about depositions, evidence gathering, and court dates. But the blog had become my true battleground, a place where I could reshape the narrative Jessica had tried to control through her accusations. Each post was a declaration that my voice mattered, that my diabetes wasn't a performance, and that my medical needs deserved respect rather than suspicion. Writing wasn't just therapeutic, it was revolutionary, a way to transform victimhood into advocacy. The online response grew beyond my expectations. Readers shared my posts, adding their own stories of medical gaslighting and family betrayal. Jessica's name became associated with disability harassment, a cautionary tale about the dangers of dismissing invisible illnesses. Carmen's cruel laughter was preserved forever in Sophia's video, a reminder of how quickly family could become complicit in cruelty. Elena's and Alejandro's false accusations haunted their social media presence as the story spread. For the first time in years, I felt powerful instead of defensive. The blog gave me purpose I hadn't expected, transforming personal pain into collective strength. I was no longer defined by my family's doubts or their dangerous ignorance about my medical condition. 6 months later, I saw Jessica at the courthouse. The marble hallway echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations as I adjusted my purse strap, my glucose monitor secure inside. Jessica stood near the defendant's bench with her lawyer, wearing a conservative black suit, her hair pulled back severely. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. She approached hesitantly, her steps uncertain, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been learning about diabetes," she said, gesturing helplessly. The insulin calculations, the constant monitoring. I didn't understand how serious it was. Her words hung between us, earnest, but weighted with the memory of the party. I studied her face, searching for genuine remorse beyond legal strategy. "That's good," I said, my tone measured. "But understanding doesn't undo the damage." Without waiting for her response, I turned toward Rachel, who was reviewing case files at our table. I didn't look back, the weight of Jessica's presence fading with each step. Sophia, who'd come to court as my witness, caught up with me, her eyes bright with pride. "You handled that perfectly," she said, her voice warm with approval. Her support remained a quiet strength, reminding me that I didn't need Jessica's belated understanding to move forward with my life. In the courtroom, I testified about the medical emergency Jessica had created, describing how her actions could have led to diabetic coma. Rachel presented Dr. Gonzalez's medical evidence, the video footage, and testimony from diabetes specialists about the seriousness of my condition. The judge listened intently as expert witnesses explained how dangerous it was to prevent diabetic access to emergency glucose supplies. Jessica's lawyer tried to minimize the incident as a family misunderstanding, but the medical evidence was overwhelming. The civil settlement came through 3 months later. Jessica was ordered to pay significant damages for medical expenses, emotional distress, and punitive damages for endangering someone with a disability. More importantly, the case established legal precedent for protecting people with invisible illnesses from family harassment. Rachel smiled as she handed me the settlement papers. "This will help other diabetics facing similar situations," she said. Back at my apartment, I found a voicemail from Mom. "I'm proud of how you handled yourself," her voice said, tentative but sincere. "I should have protected you better." The message was a small step, but it couldn't erase years of medical gaslighting and dangerous indifference. I saved the voicemail but didn't call back immediately. Healing would take time, and trust, once broken by medical neglect, didn't mend overnight. My blog had grown into a powerful advocacy platform. Invisible Battles reached thousands of readers monthly, with posts about diabetes management, family dynamics, and disability rights. Medical professionals began sharing my content, and diabetes organizations invited me to speak at conferences. A teenager with newly diagnosed diabetes wrote that my posts helped her advocate for herself at school. An older man shared how my words gave him courage to demand better medical accommodations at work. Their stories fueled my passion, transforming personal trauma into collective empowerment. The blog wasn't just healing anymore. It was creating change, giving voice to those who'd been medically dismissed by their own families. I wrote about the settlement, not to celebrate legal victory, but to highlight the importance of protecting people with disabilities. Each post reinforced that invisible illnesses were real, serious, and deserving of respect rather than suspicion. Sophia often joined me at diabetes appointments, her presence a steady comfort that contrasted sharply with my family's former indifference. Over coffee after one appointment, she scrolled through my latest blog post, grinning with pride. "You're unstoppable," she said, her admiration evident. She'd been there through every legal proceeding, every family confrontation, never wavering in her support. Her belief in me mirrored the encouragement I found online. A community that saw me for who I was, rather than doubting my medical reality. The lawsuit's conclusion felt like background music to my life's new rhythm. Rachel's final paperwork detailed Jessica's restricted contact orders and mandatory diabetes education classes. But my focus had shifted to writing, advocacy, and building a life where my medical needs were respected rather than questioned. The blog continued growing, its reach expanding beyond what I'd imagined when I started writing through pain. A reader from Chicago invited me to speak at a medical conference about family dynamics and chronic illness. Another sent a handwritten letter thanking me for making invisible disabilities visible through my words. Each message was fuel for my continued writing, proof that personal pain could become collective healing. I didn't need Jessica's understanding or Mom's belated support to feel complete. My sense of worth came from within, built on the words I wrote and the community that read them. The courthouse had been a place of justice, but the blog was my true victory. Each post was proof that I'd moved beyond my family's dangerous ignorance into a life of purpose and advocacy. Jessica's court-mandated diabetes education couldn't undo her cruelty, but it might prevent future incidents. Mom's voicemail sat answered on my phone. A bridge I might cross someday, but didn't need to travel immediately. My life was full. Medical management, writing, readers, Sophia's unwavering friendship. I was enough, not because my family finally understood, but because I'd created a community that valued truth over skepticism. The blog had opened doors I never expected, connecting me with advocates, medical professionals, and other people fighting invisible battles. 1 year later, my blog won a National Advocacy Award. The American Diabetes Association honored Invisible Battles for raising awareness about family dynamics and medical gaslighting, their citation praising my writing's impact on diabetes advocacy. I stood in a Denver convention center, holding a crystal plaque, feeling the weight of recognition that went beyond personal vindication. The applause from medical professionals, advocates, and fellow diabetics felt like warm acceptance, a stark contrast to the cruel laughter I'd once endured at family gatherings. My journey, which had started with medical emergency and family betrayal, had led to this moment of professional recognition that honored not just my voice, but every reader who'd found strength in my words. Back at my apartment, my phone rang with a call from Mom. Her voice came through more confident than before, carrying genuine remorse. "I want to make things right," she said, her words careful but earnest. Not just apologies, but real understanding. "Would you come to dinner? Just us, no party, no drama." I paused, the invitation stirring memories of past gatherings filled with medical skepticism and family judgment. Elena had sent a heartfelt apology letter, joined by several cousins who'd reached out with genuine regret about their behavior at the party. But the core family, Jessica, Carmen, most of the relatives, remained unchanged, their silence speaking louder than any gesture could. "I need respect for my medical reality, not just temporary peace," I replied, my voice steady with hard-won confidence. Mom didn't argue this time, her sigh heavy but accepting before she hung up. I turned back to my laptop, the blog open on the screen, a new post about advocacy work taking shape under my fingers. Writing had become more than therapy. It was my profession, my calling, my way of transforming medical trauma into social change. I posted about the award, not to boast, but to celebrate the community that had lifted me up. Readers, advocates, medical professionals who'd become allies in the fight for disability recognition. Their comments poured in, each one reinforcing that my voice mattered in ways I'd never imagined during those dark family gathering days. A college student with type 1 diabetes wrote that my posts helped her educate her roommates about her condition. An older woman shared how my advocacy gave her courage to confront family members who'd minimized her chronic pain. Their stories fueled my determination, a fire that burned brighter than any family gathering could extinguish. The freedom of living authentically was intoxicating and empowering. I no longer carried the burden of proving my medical condition to skeptical relatives. Jessica's accusations, once sharp wounds, had faded into distant reminders of ignorance overcome. Her court-mandated education, while legally satisfying, hadn't changed my trajectory toward independence and advocacy. Mom's invitation, Elena's letter, they were gestures, but not enough to rebuild trust destroyed by years of medical gaslighting. I was stronger for having cut those toxic ties, not because I'd found forgiveness, but because I'd chosen myself and my health over family dysfunction. Diabetes management remained central to my daily routine, each successful day a quiet victory over those who doubted my condition's reality. Dr. Gonzalez continued celebrating my improved control, noting how advocacy work had given me renewed purpose in managing my health. The blog and medical care were intertwined pillars of my new life. Writing provided clarity and community. Medical management provided physical stability and control. Together, they'd carried me through the wreckage of family betrayal, into a life where I defined my worth, rather than defending it constantly to skeptical relatives. Reflecting on my journey from that devastating birthday party to this moment of recognition, I saw the true cost of toxic family dynamics around invisible illness. The party where I'd nearly suffered diabetic coma, the accusations, the medical gaslighting. They'd been destructive but ultimately catalytic events. Cutting those ties hadn't been easy, but it had been medically and emotionally necessary. I'd once believed family approval was essential, that their understanding was my foundation. Now I knew better. My strength came from within, from the community I'd built, from the truth I'd claimed through writing and advocacy. I was free, not because I'd won their acceptance, but because I no longer needed their validation to survive and thrive. The Advocacy Award sat on my shelf, a symbol of transformation from victim to voice. But the real victory was the life I lived daily, purposeful, authentic, medically stable, and professionally meaningful. I continued writing, each post a step forward in diabetes advocacy, each reader a connection that made the chronic illness journey feel less isolating. Sophia remained my constant supporter, celebrating every milestone with fierce pride. The lawsuit had reached its conclusion, its outcome less important than the voice I'd discovered through the process. Looking back, I realized the lesson extended beyond my personal experience to anyone who'd been medically gaslit, dismissed, or forced to prove their invisible illness to skeptical family members. Your medical reality is valid, I wrote in my final post of the year. You don't need to carry the weight of others' ignorance about your condition. Find your voice, build your community of understanding, and prioritize your health over family dysfunction. Strength isn't in staying where you're not believed. It's in choosing environments where your medical needs are respected and your truth is honored. That was the heart of my transformation. Not a tale of revenge against ignorant family members, but of resilience, of finding freedom in medical advocacy and authentic living. I closed my laptop, the screen dark, my heart full of purpose. The diabetes community was vast and supportive, and I was proud to be a voice within it, helping others navigate family dynamics while managing chronic illness with dignity and strength.